And now finally, the last video of the unit, Learning Target 6 Part 2, Solving Logarithmic Equations. Again, you could probably do some mental math with this, but I encourage you to follow the steps for those that are a little bit more difficult than others. So step 1, isolate the logarithm, step 1. So isolate the logarithm. I'll remind you when you're solving something like square root of x plus 3 minus 5 equals 1, your first step is to add 5, isolate the radical. So in number 12, and in number 13, they illustrate where the logarithm's not by itself. So you have a step to isolate that. In number 12, the 2 is connected to log with multiplication, so divide by 2 to both sides. Log base 4 of x equals 3. In number 13, been using parentheses in graphing logarithms in Target 5 to kind of get your mind to seeing that x is connected to the log, but the minus 6 is after the log. So for you to isolate that, it's a lot like the minus 5 was in the square root up here to the right. You need to add 5. So in number 13, you need to add 6 to isolate the log. So log base 1/2 of x equals 3. All right, we'll talk about 14, 15, and 16 later, but let's go ahead and do these first 4. Step 1 is complete in all of the first 4, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. The logarithm is isolated. So step 2, use exponential form. I'll remind you that's step 2. That's basically learning target 4. There was a change formula that said if you have an exponent, 2 to the third equals 8, you can write that as log base 2. Take your output, make it your input, and take your input 3 and make it your output. So using that change formula, number 9, base 3, so base 3, your output was 4, that becomes the input. 3 to the 4th equals x. Therefore, 81 is x. Just to confirm that, I know by now I've shown this in class, so I'll go ahead and show this on the calculator. If you have a newer version of the TI-84 or Inspire, it should have in the math feature towards the bottom a log base option. So log base 3, parentheses 81, is that 4? Yes. So there is a way to check your answers in the calculator using log base blank. It's in your feature near where your fractions could be turned, or decimals could be turned into fractions. All right, but moving on with the notes. Number 10, base 2, so 2 cubed equals x, so 8 is x. Number 11, 1/3 base, so 1/3 base to the negative 2 equals x. So that would flip the fraction 1/3 and square it, so 1/3 flipped is 3, square it, it's 9, so x is 9. Number 12, now that we did step 1, it's as easy as 4 cubed equals x, so 64 is x. Number 13, now that we've done the step 1, it's as easy as 1/2 base cubed equals x. Cube your 1, cube your 2, 1/8 equals x. I'll check this one again, just kind of picking some at random to check. Math log base 1/2, plugging this back into the original problem, log base 1/2 of 1/8, because I'm checking my answer 1/8, right arrow, minus 6. When I hit enter, it should give me negative 3. So yes, we have the correct answer, 1/8. X is 1/8. All right, 14, 15, and 16, the last 3. Number 14, the log is not isolated because of the 30. In number 16, it's not isolated because of the 3. But in 15, log base, when there is not a base, remember that's common log, so base 10, parentheses x minus 2. Well, because of the parentheses trapping the input, the logs will be isolated. It is isolated in question 15, and it will be isolated as soon as we divide by 30 to both sides and dividing by 3 to both sides in 16. So step 1 will be met as soon as we finish that division. Log base 36 of x plus 1 equals 1/2. 15 is good to go. Number 16, log base 4 of 3x plus 1 equals 2. So step 1 done in all 3 of these. Write them with the exponential change formula. and we'll see what happens. Again, your mental math will kick in at some point, and I'm not sure when. You could just say x is blank. Like some of you may look at this and say x is, I already know the answer, it's 5. But some, it might take writing 36 to the 1/2 equals x plus 1, and recognizing the 1/2 exponent as square root. So square root of 36 is 6 equals x plus 1. And surely by now everyone's screaming x is 5. But I don't discourage mental math. I just want to make sure that you can do a question that requires the steps as well. Okay, you're basically doing the steps in your head if you're doing the mental math anyway. But number 15, you've got it isolated. So base 10 to the exponent 3 equals the input x minus 2. So 10 cubed 1,000 equals x minus 2, and add 2 to both sides. 1,000 and 2 is x. So you can have really big numbers. You can also have square root answers. You can have fraction answers, as we saw earlier in number 13. And then last one. The log is isolated, so base 4 squared equals the input 3x plus 1. So 16 equals 3x plus 1. I bet if you thought about it hard enough, whoops, I even was thinking about it and wrote the number. If you thought about it long enough, you could figure out what would you triple and add 1 to make 16, and that would be 5. Or you follow your subtract 1 to both sides, divide by 3, x is 5. So, Target 6, Part 2, solving logarithm equations.